This video contains elements that are not suitable for children under the age of 14. Viewer discretion is advised.
Well, that review for Thomas and the Magic Railroad sparked a lot of discussion, didn't it? I hope I don't have to make a review that lengthy again. I mean, the original Series 22 review was over 80 minutes long, and the Tatmar review was about half that length. Oh, and meanwhile, the online equivalent to the Morris Marina Owners Club took issue with the fact that I tore their favorite childhood movie apart. In that case, why not set up a YouTube account if you haven't already and prove you can make a better review than I did? Or, better yet, debate my reviews in a follow-up collaboration review. I bet you wouldn't last 5 minutes. But feel free to prove me wrong if you so choose. We can discuss it if you want. Alright, that aside, let's get on with the Thomas and Friends specials, starting with the 2-hour-long specials that were produced during the hit model era. Beginning with Calling All Engines. One thing I'm going to say out of the gate is that unlike what I did with the Seasons, the pack spinoff, and Tatmar, I won't be going in depth about the behind the scenes for each special. I'll just instead be giving my general thoughts on each special, the good, the not so good, what could have been done to improve the special. So let's get started with the special storyline. A new airport is being built on the island of Sodor, but the steam engines and diesel engines find it hard to work together. A summer storm does little to help the growing conflict, so Thomas and Mavis band both groups together so they can work to get everything ready in time for the airplane's first landing. One thing that makes Calling All Engines stand out against the ones to come is the learning segments, akin to those featured during the airings of Series 8 to 10, that were weaved into the narrative. Whether that's for better or for worse is up to the viewer's interpretation, but they add nothing to the story. You could cut them all together and the plot will remain unchanged. I mean, in one segment, while Thomas is looking for Mavis, he comes across Salty, yet he doesn't think of asking him to help band the steam and diesel engines together. Like, what was the point of that anyway? Why not just cut straight to Thomas meeting Mavis at the washdown and be done with it? I know the segments are intended for children, and I'm viewing them as a 26-year-old adult, but come on. I'm sure children are smarter than this. The other segments interspersed into the narrative were 3 songs by Ed Welch, Busy, Trying to Do Things Better, and Together We Made It Happened. 5 of you include a redone version of the engine roll call and a deleted song, The Dream Song. Maybe it was too depressing for kids and so it was cut? Most feature specials would later include songs within the narrative, more often than not as part of a montage or a verse sequence. If you cut the learning segments into songs, Calling All Engines would run at about 38 minutes. Excluding Steam Team to the Rescue and Thomas and the Royal Engine, running at 22.5 minutes each, it's the shortest special of the entire franchise. Speaking of the length, I haven't really discussed the story that much, and that's because there's not a whole lot to say. It's a pretty typical steam versus diesel rivalry story, only stretched out to 5 times the length of a typical episode at the time. The moral about working together was good, but there's only so many times you can teach it before it gets tiresome. It also should have been the point where the rivalry came to an end rather than using it for your story when you don't have any ideas, and it eventually reached its nadir with Series 14 to 16. Thank goodness the Brennan era put an end to that, and instead they went more for a game of one-upmanship, which I feel is a lot more interesting. There are 2 specific plot elements I'd like to talk about, the first being the engines clearing up after the big storm. Given how much damage had taken place that night, wouldn't they have gotten help from the pack so it could be dealt with faster? It's not something that hugely affects the story, but it does feel like it wanted to put more emphasis on the engines and not the road vehicles. The other is the ending with Thomas accidentally knocking the airport water tower over and causing damage to the airport runway, resulting in him asking Diesel 10 to help clear out the mess. Honestly, that accident is one of the most pointless of the entire franchise, and it feels like an excuse to A. Extend the runtime, B. Further drive the message about teamwork home, and C. Give Diesel 10's appearance a purpose. According to Sam Barlow, Lady and Diesel 10 were included because they were successful in merchandise lines, so Hit Entertainment asked for Paul Larson and Mark Seal, the writers of the special, to add them into the storyline. However, Calling All Engines is not a sequel to Tatmar, and according to Chris Lloyd, Lady is not real in the show's continuity, so thank goodness for that. You could have removed Diesel 10's role from the special, and by extension the accident, and the plot would remain exactly the same. Just have the opening ceremony go off without a hitch. Overall, Calling All Engines is pretty meh. Aside from modernizing Sodor a bit by introducing the Sodor airport and giving Emily a berth at Tidmouth Sheds, there's not really a whole lot to take away from it. There is a huge missed opportunity to bring Daisy back into the main show, yet she had to wait 10 more years, along with a switch over to CGI, before she'd be given a proper role again. It reminds me of Series 9 and 10 a bit. Kinda flat and not a whole lot of excitement going on. On a scale of 1 to 10, I give Calling All Engines a 4. Some good ideas there, but the execution could have been better. Now let's move on to the Great Discovery and...
Wait, you're reviewing Calling All Engines? Come on, Zach. You and I both know that's one of the worst specials of the whole series. Man, this
Well,
review
anything
was
to
not
make
fun
up for his
listen
absence
to
when
at
I
all.
discussed
The
Diggs and
Steam
discoveries
versus
from my
Diesel
Series
rivalry,
23
the
review, I
unnecessary
suppose.
learning
Still, I would have
segments,
preferred his
evil
fanboying
Emily.
over
The
Gina as
special was
opposed to what's about to
absolutely
happen
dreadful.
in
I think I
3,
need something to help
2,
cheer me up.
1...
Oh, I know! Tamlin! Put on a clip of Emily to get me out of my bad mood.
And now you will never move out of my shed, huffed Emily. And now you will never move out of my shed. You will never move out of my shed. You will never move out of my shed.
Oh shit. You just had to play that clip, didn't you, Tamla, you idiot? That's low even for you, and I don't feel sorry for you at all.
Zack, what's going on this time?
When I asked the silent idiot that Matt's currently beating the shit out of, he played a clip of Emily being a bitch during the hit model era, and he knew that Matt hated Emily during that time. Even I never sink to that kind of low.
Uh-oh. Gonna get the Mogul Kid again. Wait, I think Mike had it last time. Drat! I have to go look for it.
Here, Rachel. I'll give you a hand.
Thanks, mate.
Anyway, let's move on to the Great Discovery. And believe it or not, this is the 600th Thomas & Friends production that I have covered for Sodorama. No, really, 584 episodes, 13 spin-off episodes, and so far, 3 movies. Still not covering all Engines Go, by the way. It's not worth it. Anyway, on to the special. While the engines are preparing for Sodor Day, Thomas ends up on an abandoned route leading to the long-lost town of Great Waterton. While the restoration is taking place, a new tank engine named Stanley is brought in to do Thomas's regular jobs, which makes the blue tank engine jealous, especially when the other engines take a liking to Stanley. Compared to Calling All Engines, the story of the Great Discovery is a lot stronger and it feels more focused as it didn't include learning segments which tended to disrupt the pacing. They were actually considered for inclusion, but thankfully, they were relegated to bonus features instead. Like Calling All Engines, however, the Great Discovery does have a revised version of the engine roll call, albeit to include Stanley in the verse.
Henry, Toots and Edward Puffs. Stanley, he's the new one there.
As well as that, there are 3 songs interwoven into the narrative. Thomas and James are racing, There's a Job for Everyone, and Where Oh Where is Thomas, as well as a song that concludes the model era if you exclude Series 12, Thomas You're the Leader. As a matter of fact, the Great Discovery really feels like a big farewell to the models. Apart from the Steam Team and Stanley, you got appearances made by the Pack, the Scarloy engines, as well as various background engines. Don't you think that's a little excessive? In fact, the only characters that have more than one line of dialogue are Thomas, Gordon, James, Percy, Stanley, Duncan, Jack, Madge, Sir Topham Hatt, and Mr. Percival. The other half of the Steam Team, and I think the remaining 2/3 of the speaking cast, have just one line.
Oh, my, gasped Henry. Whatever will Thomas say? Why would Thomas do such a thing? Asked Toby. Sir, Thomas has disappeared, Edward puffed. No one knows where he is, whistled Emily.
Now granted, it's not like the Brenner era specials where the characters are allowed the chance to express themselves further, but for a story like The Great Discovery, I think less would have been more. I mean, Calling All Engines focused on the Steam Team, Diesel, Airy, Bert, Mavis, and Diesel 10. A small cast, sure, but it did at least feel focused. Despite the overall length of the special, The Great Discovery has its filler moments like the collapse of Rolling River Bridge, the waterworks accident, and Thomas ending up on a wooden raft in Morgan's mine before jumping a ravine and getting stuck so Stanley could find him. Like Calling All Engines, it feels less like a special and more like an extended episode. While Thomas the Stepney from Series 4 was where the Thomas gets jealous of a new engine plotline began, The Great Discovery was where it began to be used in full force, even if it wasn't used very often. They worked well for the special, don't get me wrong, but everyone wanted to be friends with Stanley when he's just arrived feels a bit forced, as if it was done just to drive Thomas's jealousy. With that being said, the ending where Thomas apologizes to Stanley for his pettiness was pretty satisfying.
I do like Stanley and Thomas's little rivalry here, but the underlying tones with Thomas and Stepney just felt stronger and could have been more utilized in the book or episode with our little Terrier engine. Both are London, Brighton and South Coast Railway drawn tank engines, but Stepney's class was better for branch line and shunting work than Thomas's despite being several decades older. Not to mention the withdrawal dates on Thomas's siblings in 1963, the very same year that the book Stepney the Bluebell Engine was published.
Yeah, I remember writing about that. It does put their rivalry in a more darker context. Kinda like Duck and Diesel now that I think about it.
Oh, we definitely need to do a discussion on the Duck and Diesel rivalry another time.
Yeah, probably. Anyway, for Pierce Brosnan's only stint as the narrator, he did okay, but more often than not, it felt as though he was reading a bedtime story, not dissimilar to Ringo Starr in the first series before picking up the energy for the second. Pierce did at least put more effort here than Alec Baldwin did in the entirety of season 6, I'll give him that, but who knows if he would have improved for series 12 to 14 as well as Here the Rails and Misty Island Rescue if he had just stayed on.
But you have to admit, Zack, seeing him guest starring as the narrator from seeing the trailer was quite surprising, wasn't it? Of course, we did have Ringo Starr, who was a member of the Beatles, a celebrity to be the narrator for the first 2 seasons of Thomas years ago, and when The Great Discovery came out, we had Pierce Brosnan, another celebrity to narrate this special. I mean, how often does the show get special guest voices like those guys?
I guess so. Well, The Great Discovery was considered really good upon release, easily the best out of the model films, although it's not saying a whole lot. Time and future specials haven't been rather kind to it. It's still enjoyable for what it is, and the theme is really strong, but unfortunately, I'm gonna have to rate The Great Discovery a 6 out of 10, a score lower than perhaps it really deserves. Overall, Calling All Engines and The Great Discovery were both fairly groundbreaking for the time, but since the release of the latter, the specials became something of a tradition that would stay with the franchise until 2018, when they were superseded by the mini-special format. Both model specials are kind of lacking in rewatch value compared to CGI ones, likely due to limitations in filmmaking at the time, so the average score between both of them is a 5 out of 10. And guess what? I've covered every last bit of the model era of Thomas and Friends. That's quite the achievement, but we've got a long way to go for the CGI specials, and I'm already dreading what's to come next.
Anything that diesels do, steam is